Be me, 23. Gender studies graduate with focus on toxic masculinity and patriarchal family structures. Spent 4 years writing papers about how traditional breadwinner roles oppress women while giving men unearned power and privilege. Always believed my dad's drinking. Problems stemmed from male inability to handle emotions and toxic masculine expectations about stoicism. Classic example of how patriarchy hurts men by preventing emotional expression and vulnerability. Posted constantly about how traditional gender roles harm everyone. Men get power but can't cry. Women get oppressed but handle emotions better. Family provider role is male privilege, disguised as sacrifice. Feel intellectually superior about understanding how gender roles damage psychological health and family dynamics. Dad worked construction for 30 years supporting mum, me, and 2 younger siblings. Always seemed stressed, distant, emotionally unavailable. Started drinking heavily when I was in high school. Blamed his alcoholism on internalized toxic masculinity and inability to process emotions healthily. Never considered that his role as sole financial provider might create genuine psychological pressure. Family dynamics felt oppressive with dad as authoritarian breadwinner, making all financial decisions while mom handled domestic labor and emotional work. Tuesday morning. Family crisis hits when dad suffers minor heart attack at job site. Doctor says stress-related, needs extended recovery time. Can't work construction for at least 6 months. Mom hasn't worked outside home in 15 years. No current job skills or recent experience. My siblings are still in high school with college expenses approaching. Family faces financial catastrophe unless someone immediately steps into provider role. Feel obligated to take responsibility despite just finishing college with liberal arts degree and minimal work experience. Wednesday. Move back home and start intensive job search. Need position that pays enough to cover mortgage, utilities, groceries, car payments, and medical expenses for family of 5. Reality of provider pressure hits immediately. This isn't about personal career goals or fulfillment. This is about preventing family from losing house and basic survival needs. Every job application carries weight of everyone's security and well-being. Thursday. Calculate actual monthly expenses required to maintain family stability. Numbers are shocking and overwhelming. Mortgage, $2,400. Utilities, $350. Groceries for 5 people, $800. Car payments, $650. Insurance, $400. Medical expenses, $300. Minimum. Survival budget, $4,900. Monthly. Need job paying at least $70,000 annually just to meet basic obligations. Entry-level positions with gender studies degree max out around $35,000 Friday. Desperation setting in as job search reveals harsh realities of supporting family versus pursuing personal interests. Cannot afford to be selective about work environment, company values, or personal fulfillment. Any job paying sufficient money becomes necessary regardless of other factors. Feel trapped by financial obligations in way I never understood when criticizing dad's career choices. Weekend. Take temporary warehouse job working nights to bring in immediate income while continuing search for better paying position. Physical labor is exhausting, but psychological pressure of family dependency is worse. Every day not earning enough means family closer to financial disaster. Start understanding weight dad carried for 30 years without complaint or recognition. Monday. Warehouse supervisor offers full-time position with overtime opportunities. Pay would cover basic family expenses, but requires 60-hour weeks in physically demanding environment. Take job immediately, despite hating work and having zero interest in warehouse management career path. Family needs override personal preferences completely. Feel first glimpse of how financial responsibility eliminates choice and forces acceptance of undesirable circumstances. Tuesday. First week of full-time providing for family. Exhaustion is total. Physical from labor, emotional from pressure, psychological from responsibility weight. Come home after 12-hour shifts to family members who need emotional support, help with problems and normal social interaction. Have no energy left for anything beyond work and basic survival. Begin understanding why dad seemed emotionally unavailable. Provider role consumes all psychological resources. Wednesday. Mum asks me to attend siblings' school conference during work hours. Cannot take time off without losing pay family desperately needs. Feel guilty disappointing family while also resenting that provider role means missing normal family involvement. trapped between financial obligation and personal relationships. Start comprehending dad's isolation from family life, despite working to support family survival. Thursday, sibling needs money for school activity. Another sibling wants new clothes. Mom needs grocery money. Every family member has financial needs that become my responsibility. Feel overwhelmed by constant pressure to generate money for other people's wants and needs while having no disposable income for personal interests. Understand, for first time, why dad seemed frustrated when family members made requests without considering financial constraints. Friday, end of first month as family provider. Bank account depleted immediately by family expenses. No money left for personal needs, social activities, or future savings. Work 60 hours weekly just to break even on family survival costs. No progress toward personal goals or financial independence. Feel trapped in cycle where entire life revolves around generating money for other people's security. Weekend. Notice behavioral changes in myself after month of provider pressure. More irritable, withdrawn, focused solely on work and money rather than relationships or interests. Start drinking beer after work to cope with stress and decompress from daily pressure. First time understanding appeal of alcohol for stress management. Recognize patterns emerging that mirror dad's behavior during my childhood. Monday, family members complain that I'm becoming distant and less emotionally available since taking provider role. Want to explain that working 60 hours weekly to keep them housed and fed leaves no energy for emotional labor. But expressing frustration makes me seem selfish or uncaring. Provider role creates double bind where you sacrifice everything for family but get criticized for neglecting emotional needs you can't afford to meet. Tuesday, consider quitting job and pursuing career I actually want. Realize immediately that this would mean family loses house within 2 months. Their security depends entirely on my willingness to sacrifice personal happiness and career satisfaction. No choice but to continue work I hate for their benefit. Feel resentment building toward family members who depend on my sacrifice while criticizing my emotional unavailability. Wednesday, Mum suggests I should spend more time with family and worry less about work. Easy to say when someone else handles all financial responsibility. Family members want emotional attention and involvement, but don't understand that provider role requires total focus on income generation for their survival. Begin understanding dad's frustration with family demands that ignored financial realities and provider pressure. Thursday, 2 months into provider role, drinking after work becomes regular habit to cope with stress and responsibility weight. Alcohol provides only escape from constant mental pressure about money, family needs, and work obligations. Brief relief from psychological burden. Finally understand why dad drank. Not toxic masculinity or emotional immaturity. Coping mechanism for unbearable provider stress. Friday. Analyze own behavior changes and psychological state since becoming family provider. More focused on practical survival than emotional expression. Less patient with family complaints about minor issues. Irritated by financial requests when budget already stretched. Developing same personality traits. I criticized in dad without understanding they were adaptations to provider role rather than character flaws. Weekend. Family gathering reveals how provider role affects family dynamics and relationships. Everyone expects me to solve their problems while offering no support for my stress or sacrifice. Provider becomes family resource rather than individual with needs. Feel invisible as person while being essential as income source. Family appreciates money but not person earning it. Monday, 3 months as provider. Consider whether sustainable long-term or will break psychologically like many men in traditional breadwinner roles. Drinking increasing to manage daily stress. Sleep quality poor due to constant worry about family financial security. Physical health declining from work demands. Understanding, developing about male suicide rates and mental health crisis among family providers. Tuesday, sibling asks why I've become mean and distant like dad was. Feel devastated by comparison but unable to explain provider psychology to someone without experience. Family sees behavior changes as personal failings rather than natural response to crushing financial responsibility. From multiple people's well-being, provider role makes you villain when you can't meet everyone's needs while sacrificing everything for their survival. Wednesday, research male provider psychology and stress-related health outcomes. Data is sobering about psychological costs of breadwinner responsibility. Higher rates of depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and suicide among men carrying sole financial responsibility for families. Provider role inherently psychologically damaging. Dad's drinking wasn't moral failing or toxic masculinity. It was stress response to unsustainable psychological pressure. Thursday, calculate how long can sustain current provider role before complete breakdown. Financial pressure combined with family emotional demands, creating unsustainable situation. Understand why some men abandon families or develop serious mental health problems. Provider role can become literally unbearable without support or recognition. Feel compassion for Dad's struggle that I completely missed while growing up in family he supported. Friday, 4 months into providing for family. Major behavioral and psychological changes obvious to everyone, including myself. Irritable, withdrawn, focused only on work and money. Drinking regularly to cope. No energy for hobbies, relationships, or personal interests. Becoming person I previously judged and criticized without understanding psychological pressures, creating personality changes. Weekend, family intervention about my drinking and emotional distance. They're concerned about behavioral changes, but offer no solutions to provider. Stress, want me to be emotionally available and psychologically healthy while maintaining financial responsibility that requires total life sacrifice. Impossible. Expectations that ignore reality of provider role psychological demands. Monday, consider therapy to address developing drinking problem and stress management. Realize immediately that therapy costs money, family budget cannot afford. Provider role prevents addressing psychological problems it creates. Cannot spend money on personal mental health when family needs every dollar for survival. Understand why Dad never sought help for drinking. Family financial needs override provider's personal health needs. Tuesday, research family financial assistance programs and support services. Most programs designed for single mothers or unemployed individuals rather than working family providers. Social safety net assumes provider role is temporary rather than ongoing crushing responsibility. No support systems for people sacrificing everything for family survival. Provider expected to handle unlimited responsibility without assistance or recognition. Wednesday, 5 months as family provider. Psychological breakdown imminent from unsustainable stress and responsibility. Drinking problem worsening. Physical health declining. Relationships with family members deteriorating despite working entirely for their benefit. Finally understand completely why Dad seemed broken and bitter during my childhood. Provider role destroys person while maintaining everyone else. Thursday, family meeting about household dynamics and my behavioral changes. They want old me back without understanding that provider role fundamentally changes psychology. Cannot be carefree, emotionally available person when carrying crushing financial responsibility for multiple people's survival and security. Provider role and normal personality cannot coexist. Family must choose between financial support and emotional relationship. Friday, 6 months after taking provider role. Complete empathy and understanding for Dad's drinking and emotional unavailability. Alcohol-only coping mechanism available when every dollar goes to family needs. Emotional distance necessary protection when everyone depends on your sacrifice. Dad wasn't toxic masculine stereotype. He was broken human being crushed by family financial responsibility for decades. Weekend, decision to continue provider role despite psychological costs because family has no alternatives. Understand now why Dad stayed in job he hated and drank to cope, not moral weakness or emotional immaturity. Necessary sacrifice for family survival. Feel profound guilt for years of judging Dad's behavior without understanding provider psychology. Monday, write letter to Dad, apologizing for misunderstanding his sacrifice and behavior during my childhood. Explain how provider experience taught me about psychological pressure and impossible family expectations. He navigated for 30 years. Thank him for sacrifice that enabled my education and opportunities. while destroying his personal happiness and mental health. Tuesday, Dad's response to letter is emotional. Relief that someone finally understands provider burden and sacrifice. He explains decades of feeling unappreciated and misunderstood while working. Jobs he hated to support, family that criticized his personality changes. Provider. Role made him villain in family despite being sole. Reason for their security and survival. Wednesday. Research how to address provider stress while maintaining family responsibility. Very limited resources and solutions available. Most advice assumes ability to reduce work hours or change careers. Provider role eliminates these options when family depends on maximum income. Social support systems don't recognize ongoing provider stress as legitimate mental health crisis requiring intervention. Thursday, 7 months as provider. Accept that role requires personal sacrifice and psychological damage that society doesn't acknowledge or address. Continue drinking to cope with stress because alternatives aren't available or affordable. Family needs override personal mental health needs. Understand completely why provider role breaks so many men and why Dad turned to alcohol for psychological survival. Friday, final reflection on provider experience and understanding of Dad's behavior and struggles. Provider role is psychological torture disguised as male privilege. Financial responsibility for multiple people destroys individual well-being and mental health. Dad's drinking wasn't moral, failing but necessary coping mechanism for unbearable stress that lasted decades. Society expects men to sacrifice everything for family financial security while providing no support for psychological costs. Weekend, continue provider role with new appreciation for Dad's sacrifice and complete understanding of his behavioral changes. Toxic masculinity didn't make Dad drink. Family financial responsibility did. Provider. Psychology creates behavioral changes that look like character flaws but are actually stress. Responses to impossible expectations. Maybe understanding provider burden creates empathy for men breaking under family financial responsibility. Maybe Dad deserves support rather than criticism for carrying crushing psychological weight for decades. Maybe drinking problem was symptom of provider stress rather than personal moral failing. Just a thought.